Okay, well, it is good to be back. I've been in Italy for almost a month where I feel right at home because everybody speaks with their hands. And one of the peculiarities that when I'm out with the group, often I end up being the navigator because one, I've got Google Maps, and two, I've got the most data. But when you're in a place, even this building that has stone walls, the signal goes crazy and it doesn't give you accurate information about where you are all the time. So I was with a group of friends and we went in a town called Viterbo. We were staying in a sketchy little place. We went for a walk and we went to the big cathedral. There was a museum. It was, a beautiful European square. And then we were looking for supper and Google Maps took us around the back of the same building and everything changed. The gates, the big metal grates, they'd been kicked in. Every window on the street was broken. There were remnants of cooking fires that were in people's yards. There were almost no flower boxes in the windows. And what was really, really creepy is that there was not a soul on the street anywhere. And I thought, I don't think this is a good place for us to be right now. Then we saw a guy walk down the street. He was dressed, I don't know how to put this delicately, except sort of pimped out. It was a style. It was not an Italian style. It was something else altogether. And he had a great big Doberman on a leash. And most people in Italy, if you say buongiorno, if you try and speak bad Italian, they'll at least smile at you, if for no other reason than pity. This guy was stony-faced when the four of us walked by. I thought, we're going to get out of here right now, and we did. Do any of you know what we walked into? So in Canada, if a person comes here legally or illegally, usually they have to have some kind of means to get across the ocean. But in Europe, the migrants will cross the Mediterranean in anything that floats, and I mean anything that floats, and wash up on the shores, and you get an entirely different level of poverty and desperation that I don't think I've ever seen here in Canada. And, as I was reflecting on that, we were seeing it everywhere, and you think that there might be tensions here about the level of immigration. It's mild. Things are polarizing in extreme ways. And for the first time, I realized that a great deal of the Old Testament is actually the oral memory of a series of memories that evolved around climate change and people movements. So the earliest vestigial memory of the human race is the Garden of Eden, which was watered day by water, which came up from the ground. And then they have to move, and where do they end up? In a place where it's very, very hard to grow food, and they can only do it by the sweat of their brows. And, the story of Noah, flooding so severe that it was like the entire world was covered with water. In the days of Abraham, in the days of Isaac, in the days of Jacob, there were droughts that were so severe that entire populations had to move somewhere else just so that their families wouldn't starve to death. That is a biblical story. And so, as I was saying, in Italy and all of Europe, it's creating these tensions, and it's like the contrast was amazing. The contrast between the cathedral in front, decked out with Euro money, and the squatters' camp in back. And the locals don't want the numbers that are coming, and the migrants can't stay where they were. And it occurred to me that Psalm 90 is about the impossible contrasts of this world that we find continue to happen all around us. On one hand, we have the eternal God who occupies space that that is greater than the entire cosmos, that has existed before the billions of years of this young planet Earth, who has the knowledge to put together the DNA spirals that are invisible and make up our being. And Psalm 90 says of this God, before the mountains were brought forth, or you had ever formed the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. And in contrast, you have poor little us. It says, you turn us back to dust. And you say you turn back, you mortals, for 1,000 years. In your sight is like yesterday when it's past, or a watch in the night. You sweep them away there like a dream, like grass that is renewed in the morning. In the morning it flourishes and is renewed, and in the evening it fades and withers. So you ask, how can those two realities exist in the same universe? And you may have asked that same question, but on a very personal level. You know, if God is that big, if God is that powerful, if God is that living, that loving, how can the suffering and wrong in this world continue to exist? And, you know, I personally, I feel a twinge every time I walk by someone who's sleeping in the doorway of a downtown business, or I pass one of the tents that are pitched by the creek, because I know that they're housing people who are unhoused at the same time that I live in a house that has 3 empty bedrooms, and yet I would be afraid to bring strangers into my home. That's a contrast. It's a contradiction, isn't it? And it's not a guilty feeling, but it's a curious kind of disturbing. You know, there are 3 ways that I can see that we can deal with irreconcilable contrasts, things that are too different from each other and we can't make them make sense together. And the first one is just keep busy and try to ignore what's happening out there. You know, call bylaws and get them to move those tents where we can't see them, get those guys out of the park. And, you know, on one hand, I know this isn't your radar, but this has been on my radar for a month. On one hand, you know, being there, I can understand the impulse behind people electing these right-wing governments, because they wanted to help out, and now they're getting exponentially growing problem of broken windows and garbage and beggars and crime and this enormous expense of feeding and housing and policing, and they want it to stop before it overwhelms them, if it hasn't already overwhelmed them. And on the other hand, you can understand why, if you're living in a place where you can't get enough food to feed your family, you're not going to just sit there. You're going to take whatever risks it takes to make a better life, even if it's in a place that's not particularly welcoming. And, you know, the second both of those things make sense, and the contrast is impossible. And there's a second way to think about it. And the second way to deal with contrast is to try to fix things and make the contrast go away and make everything work, to try and make the poor rich, to enact laws, to make any kind of discrimination illegal, and to use all of your social and political leverage to make all people equal in terms of assets and opportunity, and remove the contrasts. And that is the impulse behind most activism. Now, these are I'm going to acknowledge that there are very good Christian people who see this differently, but I'm going to just tell you how I see the second option, because I want to respect that impulse, because it comes from a place of genuine caring. It's rooted in the Jewish and Christian scriptures, where God takes the side of the poor and of the oppressed and the widow and the orphan and the hungry, and followers of Jesus Christ. That's us. We we imitate his care for the sick and for the poor and the dispossessed and the widow and the orphan. But in real life, you know, real people, real situations, who make real choices. Have you ever noticed it's not that easy to fix the problems of the world so that they stay fixed? It's like, have you ever played whack-a-mole at the X? You know, you whack down one problem, another one that you didn't mean pops up somewhere else. And the problems change, but those impossible contrasts, they just persist. Psalm 90 has another way of living with the contradictions and the contrasts of this world, and there are two clues. Psalm 90 begins with these words. It says, Lord, you have been our dwelling place for all generations. What does that mean, to have a dwelling place? Especially for moving populations that literally have no dwelling place of their own. When our grandson was born 2 years ago, he came into the world 7 weeks early. So, he was able to get nourishment through a tube. He was able to get heat through an incubator, but preemies need something else to thrive. Any guesses? They need touch. So here's the thing, they authorized several people, including Doug, to have it was COVID times, and I was out of town again, skin-to-skin contact, and when babies have skin-to-skin, heart-to-heart, they thrive in a different way, except one thing, other thing that they need that they can't get with skin-to-skin contact. I did not know this. When their mother is the person holding them, they recognize the unique heartbeat, the unique smell, I suppose, and not only do they get the warmth of skin contact and the voice that they recognize, they stop squiggling and they go into an altered brain state because that person is life. That person is where they came from. That person is the place that he longs for, even if he can't articulate it or form it in his thoughts. He doesn't need photo ID and a witness to identify that person. Every cell in his little body knew who that was. Deuteronomy 33:27 says, "The eternal God is your refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms." There is a place in this universe where you belong. There is this person where you belong, where you have always belonged, where you will always belong, where you have always belonged. And apart from that, you can never satisfy that yearning to belong, that love you are seeking. If you put it all in another person, they will disappoint you because no one can love you perfectly in the way you long to be loved, only one. And in the contradictions of this world that face us in every place, on every level, God is your safe place. Second clue, Psalm 90, verse 12. It says, "Teach us to number our days so that we may gain a heart of wisdom." And what is a heart of wisdom? Well, a heart of wisdom is not looking the other way so we don't have to see the problems of this world. We can just distract ourselves. Keep that phone in front of you. There's a lot you don't have to look at. And a heart of wisdom is not living in a constant fear, a constant state of fear and anxiety. You know, we have an entire generation who've been brought up to think it's not safe to bring children into this world because the planet is about to dry up, and it's a cycle of fear in the media that keeps people clicking and tuning in. I mean, it still bugs me to death when they're predicting 4 centimeters of snow and telling people to stay off the road. I am a baby boomer. We did walk to school 2 miles uphill in both directions, snow up to the telephone. You know, I never mind what I want to say, but it's a fear cycle. A heart of wisdom is not living in despair because none of the problems that the world is facing are too big and too unsolvable. Most of what we face today has been faced before. It's not to say we do nothing. And a heart of wisdom, I don't think, is the kind of activism that forces people to do what they don't want to do and think what they don't want to think, because what happens when the pressure lets up? The pendulum, what happens when the political pendulum swings the other direction? See, I think ultimately, the only safeguard for human rights is going to be the Church of Jesus Christ, because we believe that apart from what anybody is or believes, that they are made in the image and likeness of God, and that is what gives them value, and that is what gives them dignity. So all people are worthy of dignity, no matter what the political spectrum is doing at any given time. But the scriptures give us another way of dealing with contrasts. Last Sunday, Doug and I were in a Presbyterian church. You don't think you could find one in Rome. There's only one, Church of Scotland. And there was a presentation that day that knocked the socks off me. I was so impressed. I'd never seen anything like it. There's a group of churches that have created a mission called Mediterranean Hope. And for 10 years, this coalition of churches, they acted as activists, they engaged governments, they created political pressure to accept more and more migrants, and the entire time, the local population was hardening in their attitudes. And so what you had going over there and what could happen here is you have this polarization of opinions. And when the voters are going one way and the government has been going the other way, what happens at election time? You know what happens at election time. So they realized that they had to do things differently. For instance, people were really, really mad because when they were driving into the city to go to work early in the morning, there were all these migrants all over the highway on their bicycles who were also taking their bicycles into the city to work. And the insurance companies were mad because there were all these crashes that kept scratching up the car, and obviously it wasn't good for the migrants because significant numbers were being killed on the highways. So this group said, what we will do is we will build a bicycle corridor next to the highway, and suddenly migrants aren't being killed, the insurance companies are happy again, and the level of anger goes down. I thought that was brilliant. See, as a Christian, you are able to live creatively with the contrasts and contradictions of life because of Jesus Christ. See, the love of God surrendered to the sinful humanity, nailed to the cross, dead in a tomb, raised to glory. You're not going to get bigger contrasts than that. I know I'm going over time, Ian, but hold on there for a minute. Okay, so I'm going to quote a scholar named Rodney Start, who's written over 30 books, more than 140 articles on subjects as diverse as prejudice, crime, suicide, city life in ancient Rome. He's won the Distinguished Book Award from the Society for Scientific Study of Religion twice. I'm just giving you these credentials because this guy is a legit sociologist. And this is what he says about the superpowers that are within the religious community. He studied specifically churches, Christians who attend church. This is his research on religious people. He says, religious people are the primary source of secular charitable funds that benefit the victims of misfortune, whatever their beliefs. He said, religious Christians who regularly attend church dominate the ranks of blood donors and other pro-social behaviors, are far more likely to donate their time to socially beneficial programs, be active in civic affairs, enjoy superior mental health, are deemed happier, less neurotic, far less likely to commit suicide, enjoy superior physical health. Look at you. Have an average life expectancy more than 7 years longer than the irreligious. You know a lot of old people, don't you? They read more than their irreligious friends and neighbors. They're more apt to marry, less likely to divorce, report higher degrees of satisfaction with their spouse. Religious husbands are far less likely to abuse their wives or children. Of course, that's contrary to the story that religions create systems of oppression like patriarchy. Religious fathers are more likely to be involved in youth activities like coaching sports teams, leading scout troops. Religious students do better on standardized achievement tests, less likely to drop out of school, better jobs on graduation, less likely to be unemployed. Just a couple more for you. 247 different studies done between 1944 2010. Religion has a positive effect on society and delinquency. Stats going back to the 1920s say the higher the percentage of church membership in a city, the lower its burglary, larceny, robbery, assault, and homicide rates. Like, it is really to society's benefit to have churches. So all social justice, all goodness in society is rooted in this transcendence, the understanding that there is something, that there is someone who is eternal, that is bigger than all of this, that has made each one of us in his image and likeness. Rick Warren says that the purpose of your life is so far greater than your own personal fulfillment. It's greater than your peace of mind, your happiness. It's far greater than your family or career or even your wildest dreams and ambitions. If you want to know why you were put on this planet, you begin with God and knowing his plan and purpose for you. I'm going to close with one of the last letters that C.S. Lewis wrote. You know C.S. Lewis? Any of you read the Narnia books?
Yes.
So just before he died, he got a letter from one of his young fans who wanted to know if any more Narnia books were going to be produced. And it turned out to be, this was his farewell, really, to his readers. He answered, "Dear Ruth," it was written on 26th of October, 1963, a month before he died. He said, "Dear Ruth, many thanks for your kind letter. And it was very good of you to write and tell me that you like my books, and what a very good letter you write for your age." He paused for just a moment, then he wrote, "If you continue to love Jesus, nothing much can go wrong with you, and I hope you may always do so. I don't think I can leave you with any better words. If you continue to love Jesus, you will keep doing good. If you continue to love Jesus, you will stay involved in your church. If you continue to love Jesus, the eternal God will be your dwelling place, and underneath you will find the everlasting arms." Let's pray. Lord our God, we give you thanks that you are our true and eternal home, that in this world of contrasts, contradictions, and disruptions, we do not have to be disrupted internally because we are yours. And we have a stability in a relationship that cannot be shaken. Dear God, I pray that you will put in our bodies and in our spirits your heart of compassion for those who are sick and for those who are suffering, for those who are without a home and distressed. We give you thanks, God, not only when we are not in that condition, but we give you thanks that we can experience in you what it is to be part of the solution to the problems that present us. God, give us creativity and resilience for the years ahead. Let us look at the problems of this world face on with neither being afraid, nor coming up with simplistic answers, nor turning away, but trusting in your great grace given to us through Jesus Christ on the cross. Know that there is no problem so great that you are not greater. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.